Hey you, how's it going? Do you ever find yourself worried about the future? We get it. Not knowing what's coming is enough to make anyone uncomfortable. The thing is, we aren't that great at thinking about the future in the first place. We often imagine the future in black and white terms, an unthinkably bad future versus an unimaginably good one. But the future is never this simple. Hey, how can I predict the future, you might wonder? How can anyone know what's coming? Well, fortunately, there's a model for facing the future accurately. When futurists in the 70s began tackling this problem, they noticed that there was a certain number of stories we tell ourselves about the future. 4 of them, in fact. First, they found stories of a future of continued growth, one that embraces the myth of indefinite linear progress. Then, as a counterpoint to continuation from those who understood that indefinite growth in a finite system is impossible, there were stories of collapse, a tear in the fabric that brings progress to a standstill, or sends society reeling backwards. Third, since continuation isn't possible, and collapse isn't desirable, there were stories that aligned to certain standards, values, or constraints. This was the disciplined future. Finally, there were stories about a future in which something unprecedented happens, a game changer on our fundamental assumptions, and this was known as the transformational future. This insight set off the alternative futures model developed by Jim Dator and the Manoa School of Future Studies. Instead of 2 binary options, the alternative futures model allowed futurists to consider many different scenarios in a contained way. Using this model, we can imagine the future in a deeper and more profound way than we would otherwise, and hence be more prepared to deal with it. Read as verbs, these 4 generic futures became known as continue, collapse, discipline, and transform. This model is most useful for classifying all the possibilities of the future into a framework that makes it easier to understand and describe. Because once we have an understanding of future possibilities, we can begin to influence and create them. Remember, the future does not yet exist. We have the power to influence it. Using the alternative futures model, we can imagine all the different futures of which we can influence and shape our futures from. Futurists take this organized possibility space and apply it to what's known as the futures cone. From all the possible futures that exist, they parse things down into probable futures. Then, using these probable futures, they narrow the picture down into one of a few preferred futures. Standing here gives us a much better handle on what's coming and how we can create the things we want, as well as anticipate the things we don't. We can apply this model into our own lives as well. When you're considering the future, ask yourself the following questions. First, what are the ways in which the system that you find yourself in might continue as it is? Second, what are the ways in which it could fall apart? Third, what are the ways in which it could be directed? And fourth, what are the ways in which it could change altogether? Once you have these questions answered, apply the futures cone. From all the possibilities, which of the scenarios is most probable? And from the probable, which ones are the most preferable? From here, you can lay the groundwork needed to create that. Generally speaking, we are terrible at anticipating change. Addressing the wide range of possible futures is the first step toward becoming better at it. And with this, knowledge is power.